They thought they owned her voice, but the hall had other plans, and she learned to fight back. Subscribe, not for entertainment, but so these stories are never silenced again. The winter of reason was cruel even by northern standards. Snow fell like ash, burying memories and sins alike. Villagers locked their doors before sunset, not because of wolves, but because silence itself felt dangerous after dark. At the edge of the valley stood the ruins of St. Eloan's Chapel, burned years ago during a forgotten revolt. No bells rang there anymore. No prayers survived. Only echoes. That was where she sang. Lucia stood alone among blackened stones, her breath rising in pale clouds. Her coat was thin, her hands cracked from cold. Yet when her voice lifted, the night itself seemed to pause. It was not loud. It did not beg for attention. It commanded it. Her voice carried grief, deep, controlled, devastating. Each note trembled with loss, yet never collapsed. It was the kind of singing that did not entertain. It confessed. She sang for her dead husband, crushed in a mine the Baron owned. She sang for her child, buried in frozen ground without a coffin. She sang because silence would have killed her faster. Unbeknownst to her, a carriage had stopped on the ridge above the ruins. Inside sat Baron Albrecht von Riesen. He was a tall man with silver-threaded hair and eyes sharpened by ownership. His estate controlled the mines, the land, the law, and often the lives of everyone in the valley. He had heard music across Europe. Opera houses bowed to him. Composers begged for his favor. Yet this voice, raw, untrained, bleeding with truth, made his fingers tighten on the cane. "Stop," he whispered, not to her, but to the world. The driver glanced back nervously. "Shall we move on, my lord?" The Baron did not answer. Lucia reached the final note of her song. It rose, broke, and fell like a soul surrendering to gravity. When it ended, the silence was violent. The Baron smiled. "Find her," he said. That night, Lucia returned to her small rented room near the mine road. She warmed her hands over a weak fire and allowed herself to cry for exactly 1 minute. Then there was a knock. Firm, certain, unavoidable. When she opened the door, men in dark coats filled the doorway. Behind them stood the Baron himself, perfectly composed, untouched by the cold. "You sang tonight," he said calmly. Lucia's heart raced. "I sing for no one." The Baron stepped inside without permission. His gaze moved around the room, assessing value. "You sing for me now." Before she could answer, his men seized her arms. Outside, the wind howled through the valley, and the ruins of St. Eloan listened, as another soul was taken from the dark. Lucia awoke to warmth she had not felt in years. For a moment she believed she was dead. The bed beneath her was wide and heavy with velvet covers. Candles burned quietly along the walls, their flames steady, disciplined, nothing like the shaking light of her old room. The air smelled of polish, wax, and something metallic beneath it all. She sat up too quickly. Her wrists ached. No chains, no ropes. That frightened her more. Beyond the tall windows rose the dark outline of Riesen Manor, a structure so vast it seemed less built than claimed. Towers pressed into the sky like fingers, and the stone walls bore the weight of centuries of obedience. A maid entered without knocking. "You are awake," the woman said, not asking. Her voice was flat, trained, empty. "You will be bathed, then dressed. His lordship expects you before dusk." Lucia swung her legs off the bed. "I want to leave." The maid paused, then smiled with practiced pity. "No one leaves the Baron's house unless he wishes it." 2 other women appeared. They guided Lucia not roughly, but with absolute certainty, hands firm, unavoidable. As they bathed her, scrubbed the dirt from her skin, combed her hair. Lucia realized something worse than cruelty was at work. Efficiency. They dressed her in a pale gown that was not hers. It fit too well, as if she had already been measured. As they worked, Lucia searched their faces for sympathy. She found none. The Baron received her in a long gallery filled with portraits. Men stared from gilded frames, generations of von Riesens, all severe mouths and confident eyes. Some wore military coats, others judicial robes. All of them looked like men who had never asked permission. "You clean up beautifully," the Baron said, pouring wine. Lucia did not sit. "Why am I here?" He gestured toward the piano in the corner. "Sing." "I will not." The Baron smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You misunderstand. This is not a request." She remained silent. With a small nod, the Baron motioned toward the window. Lucia followed his gaze and froze. Below in the courtyard stood the miners' barracks. Guards had dragged 3 men outside. One of them was old Thomas, who used to bring her bread. The Baron sipped his wine. "Your voice is persuasive. Imagine what it could prevent." Lucia's hands trembled. "Sing," he said softly. Her throat tightened. Every instinct screamed to refuse, but the screams below had already begun. She moved to the piano like a condemned woman approaching the gallows. When she sang, it was broken at first, shallow, fear-clogged. The Baron raised a hand. "Again," he said, this time with feeling. Lucia closed her eyes and sang, not to please him, but to save them. She poured desperation into every note, grief sharpened into sound. Below, the guard stopped. The men were released. Lucia's knees buckled. The Baron applauded, slow and deliberate. "You see," he said, "your voice already belongs here." That night, as Lucia lay awake in her locked room, she understood the truth. She had not been imprisoned in a house. She had been redefined. And somewhere deep in the manor, behind walls meant to swallow sound, the Baron began planning a stage built just for her. Lucia learned the rhythm of the house quickly. Morning came without sunlight. Heavy curtains sealed the rooms in eternal dusk. And bells, not voices, dictated movement. A bell for waking, a bell for meals, a bell for rehearsal. No one ever rang a bell for freedom. On the 3rd morning, Lucia was led to the west wing. A corridor she had not yet seen. The air there was colder, the walls thicker, as if the house itself was bracing for something buried inside. At the end stood a door reinforced with iron bands. Inside waited a table, 2 chairs, and the Baron. Spread before him were papers, dozens of them, neatly aligned, their edges sharp as blades. "Sit," he said. Lucia remained standing. "You promised no harm would come to the miners if I sang." "And it didn't," the Baron replied calmly. "I keep my word. That is why people trust me." She laughed bitterly. "Trust?" He folded his hands. "This is a business arrangement. You sing, you are housed, fed, protected. Your village remains, undisturbed. And if I refuse?" The Baron did not answer immediately. Instead, he slid one paper toward her. Lucia looked down. The words swam before her eyes, dense, legal language written in a dialect, meant to confuse, not clarify. "I cannot read this," she said. "That is unfortunate," he replied, "but not uncommon." Her heart pounded. "Then I will not sign." The Baron leaned back. "You already have." She stared at him. He rang a bell. A servant entered and placed a small wooden box on the table. Inside lay Lucia's old coat, mud-stained, torn, and beneath it, her husband's mining tag, bent and rusted. "We recovered this from the collapse site," the Baron said softly. It would be tragic if records were adjusted. Lucia's breath left her body. You wouldn't, she whispered. The Baron's eyes hardened. I own the mine. I own the records. I own the truth that gets written. Silence filled the room like water rising. Slowly, Lucia sat. She took the pen. The moment it touched the page, the Baron smiled, not in victory, but in confirmation. Rehearsals began that same evening. She was taken underground. Beneath the manor, past wine cellars and sealed storage rooms, lay a chamber carved from stone. Rows of seats curved toward a small stage. Gold leaf lined the arches. Chandeliers waited unlit like sleeping eyes. This is not for the public, the Baron explained as they walked. Only for those worthy of listening. Lucia swallowed. I am not an object. No, he said. You are an instrument. A musician struck the first note. Lucia sang. The sound behaved strangely in the chamber, thicker, heavier, as if the walls absorbed pain and reflected it back. Her voice echoed longer than it should have, returning altered, almost alive. She stopped mid-area. Did you hear that? She asked. The Baron nodded. The room remembers. Night after night she sang. Each time the chamber seemed to grow more attentive. The servants watched with hollow eyes. The musicians avoided her gaze. One evening, a young violinist whispered as he passed her, Don't sing your real sorrow. Lucia turned. Why? He did not answer. That night, alone in her room, Lucia examined her throat in the mirror. Faint bruises bloomed beneath her skin, not from hands, but from something deeper. She pressed her fingers there and realized the truth. This house was not just stealing her voice. It was feeding on it. The bell rang after sunset. Lucia knew what it meant now. She was escorted through corridors she had never walked before. Longer, deeper, quieter. The servants moved faster tonight, eyes lowered, hands tense. Even the walls seemed to lean inward, as if listening. When the iron doors opened, the underground opera hall was no longer empty. They had come. Men in tailored coats, women draped in velvet and pearls, faces pale as candle wax, nobles from distant provinces, judges, financiers, men who decided fates with signatures, women who smiled while watching others fall. No one spoke above a whisper. Lucia's breath caught. You said this was private. The Baron stood beside her, immaculate as ever. It is. Every person here has paid dearly for the privilege. She looked at the stage. There were no flowers. No applause, only expectation. Chains of silence. Sing, he said. Lucia stepped forward, her legs unsteady. The musicians waited, bows hovering like poised knives. The chandeliers flared to life, flooding the hall with golden light. She began with La Traviata. The first notes were careful, restrained. She sang as if walking on thin ice. The audience leaned forward. Some closed their eyes. Others watched her mouth, her throat, the rise and fall of her chest. Halfway through the aria, something shifted. A woman in the front row began to cry. A man behind her pressed his fingers into his ears, shaking. Another laughed softly, as if drunk on sorrow. Lucia felt it then, the pull. The room was drawing the sound out of her, stretching it, deepening it. Her voice grew fuller, darker, heavier with every breath. She tried to hold back, but the music demanded more. By the final note, her vision blurred. Silence followed. Then applause, slow, reverent, terrifying. The Baron clapped last. Exquisite, he said. You see? They worship what they cannot have. Lucia stumbled backstage, barely standing. No one helped her. Servants avoided her gaze as if she were contagious. In the dressing room, she vomited into a porcelain basin. Blood streaked the water. She stared at it, trembling. The next morning, the violinist found her in the corridor. "They felt it," he whispered urgently. "Didn't they?" Lucia nodded. "What is happening to me?" He glanced around, then leaned closer. This hall was built over older foundations. The Baron didn't create it. He discovered it. Discovered what? A place that feeds on grief, on confession, on voices that carry truth. Lucia's chest tightened. "And if I stop singing?" The violinist's face drained of color. "Then it will take the sound anyway." That evening, Lucia returned to the hall alone. She placed her hand on the stone wall and felt it pulse, slow, hungry, alive. For the first time, fear was replaced by something else, understanding. If the hall could feed on her voice, then perhaps it could be poisoned by it too. Far above in his study, the Baron reviewed invitations for the next performance. He did not hear Lucia whisper to the walls, "If you are listening, then learn. If you are listening, then learn." Lucia pressed her hand against the stone, feeling its slow, hungry pulse. She could sense the walls shifting subtly, as if responding to her will. For the first time, she wondered if the hall could be turned against itself, if her voice could become a weapon instead of a cage. The violinist appeared quietly at the corridor's edge, eyes wide with fear. "You felt it," he whispered. "It listens differently now. Every note you sing, every thought you have. It remembers. It grows with your fear." "I know," Lucia murmured, her jaw tight. "But maybe I can use it, make it obey me instead of him." He shook his head slowly. "The Baron does not understand it. No one does. One wrong move and it will take more than your voice. Be careful." Her fingers lingered on the wall a moment longer. Then she stepped toward the stage alone. The chandeliers flared to life, scattering light across the empty seats. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls. The hall itself was awake, waiting, pulsing with expectation. She took a deep breath and sang her first note softly, cautiously. The hall immediately pulled it in, twisting and thickening it, returning it heavier, alive. She sang again, letting grief flow into each melody, then anger, then defiance. Every note became a refusal to be possessed, a declaration that she would not be owned. Time lost all meaning. Minutes stretched into hours she could not measure. Her voice strained, every breath a battle against the chamber's hunger. Yet with every note she learned, shaping the sound like a blade, taking back small pieces of herself from the hall's grasp. By the final note, silence fell over the chamber. But it was different this time, less demanding, less hungry. Lucia pressed her palm to the stone, feeling the pulse slow, almost hesitant, as if it had understood something new. The violinist stepped beside her, whispering. It obeyed differently this time. It listened to you. A flicker of triumph warmed her chest, though fear lingered. She knew the Baron would notice soon. He always noticed, but for now, the hall had learned what she had. Courage could not be consumed. Above, in his study, the Baron frowned over reports of the empty hall. Something had shifted. He could not yet name it, but he felt it. Deep beneath recent manor, the stones pulsed faintly, alive with a voice that was no longer entirely his. Lucia straightened, heart pounding. For the first time, she felt she was not just a prisoner. She was something more, something dangerous. The morning light barely reached the corridors. Lucia moved silently, every step cautious. The manor felt heavier than usual, as if it had remembered last night. The stones beneath her fingers still pulsed faintly, a heartbeat she could feel but not see. The violinist appeared in the corner, bow in hand, eyes wide. "You changed it," he said softly. "The hall." It listened. It obeyed you. but be careful. It learns faster than anyone." "I know," she replied, pressing her palm again to the cold wall. "And I will make sure it learns what I want it to." His face paled. "The Baron will notice soon. He already suspects. He always notices. You cannot hide your power for long." Lucia nodded, swallowing her fear. She knew the risk, but she also knew that the hall was no longer just a prison. It could be a weapon. That evening, she returned to the underground hall alone. The chandeliers flared to life, casting fractured light over empty seats. The shadows clung to the corners, stretching unnaturally. The air was thick, as if it were breathing with her, waiting. She took a deep breath and began to sing. The first notes were cautious, trembling, testing the hall's reaction. Immediately, the walls drew the sound inward, twisting it, thickening it, stretching it beyond control. She let grief flow into the melody, then anger, then defiance. Each note fought back against the chamber, each vibration a claim of her will. Minutes stretched into an hour. Her throat burned, her limbs ached, but she pressed on. The hall pulsed with every note, alive and aware. But she shaped the sound like a blade, bending it, reclaiming it piece by piece. By the final note, silence fell. But it was different now, less demanding, less threatening. She pressed her hand to the wall. The pulse had slowed. The hall had recognized her control. The violinist appeared beside her, whispering, "You did it. You really did it." For the first time, it obeyed you completely. Lucia exhaled, a mixture of triumph and fear. She knew the Baron would notice soon. He always did. But for now, she had proven something vital. Courage and control could not be taken. Above in the Baron's study, he frowned over the reports. Something had shifted in the manor. He did not yet know what, but he could feel it. Deep beneath recent manor, the stones pulsed faintly, alive with a voice that was no longer entirely his. Lucia straightened, heart pounding. For the first time, she felt something she had never felt before. Power. Real power. The next morning, the corridors felt colder than usual. Lucia walked silently, fingers brushing the stone walls. She could still feel the hall's pulse beneath her touch. A slow, deliberate rhythm, aware, watching. It remembered every note she had sung, every tremor of her fear, every ounce of defiance. The violinist met her near the western wing. His face was pale, his hands trembling. "It's different now," he whispered. "It remembers more than ever. It will test you. It will push you harder." Lucia's lips pressed into a thin line. "Then I will push back. It cannot own me." "Not now." He glanced at her, unease written in every line of his face. "The Baron will notice soon. He always notices. He will come to the hall. And when he does, you must be ready." She nodded, a flicker of fear mixing with determination. She had no illusions. Tonight the hall would demand more than her voice. The chandeliers flared as she stepped into the underground hall. Shadows reached from every corner, curling like waiting hands. The air pressed against her chest. She could feel it, the hall's anticipation, its hunger. Her first note slipped out cautiously. The hall seized it immediately, drawing it inward, stretching it, twisting it. But she did not falter. She let grief flow, then defiance, shaping each note like a blade. The hall resisted, pulling at her voice, trying to consume it, but she pressed back, bending it to her will. Minutes passed, stretched, then blurred into one. Her arms ached, her throat burned, but she continued. Every note was a battle, every vibration a test. The hall pulsed beneath her, alive, and yet she held control. When the final note faded, silence fell like a thick blanket. The hall's pulse slowed, almost hesitant, almost respectful. The violinist appeared beside her, whispering, "It has learned." But so have you. You pushed it further than before. Lucia exhaled, chest heaving. She knew the Baron would notice soon. He always noticed. But for the first time, she felt that the hall was not just a trap. It was something she could bend, something she could use. Above, the Baron's study glowed with candlelight. He frowned at reports, sensing a shift he could not yet name. The manor pulsed faintly beneath him, alive with a voice that was no longer entirely his. Lucia straightened, heart pounding, a spark of triumph warming her chest. She was no longer only a prisoner. She was something more, something dangerous. The summons came at dusk, not by bell, not by servant, by silence. Lucia felt it the moment she crossed the inner corridor. The manor held its breath. Even the walls seemed alert, their pulse sharper, tighter. This was different. This was command. The violinist caught her arm. His grip was desperate. "He's going to the hall tonight," he whispered. Not as a patron, as a master. Lucia's stomach tightened. Then it's time he learns who it listens to now. The underground doors opened slowly. Too slowly. The chandeliers ignited one by one, not warm this time, but harsh, unforgiving. The Baron stood alone in the center of the hall. No audience, no musicians, just him. "You've been singing without permission," he said calmly. Lucia stepped forward. "You never said the hall required it." A smile touched his lips. Thin, controlled. "The hall requires obedience." She felt the walls stir. The pulse quickened, hungry, curious. "Sing," he commanded. Lucia inhaled, and chose not sorrow, not fear, truth. Her first note cut through the space, sharp and unyielding. The hall reacted instantly, pulling at the sound, trying to bend it, but she resisted. She sang of confinement, of being watched, of being owned. The walls trembled. The Baron's expression shifted. Just slightly. She pressed on. Every note carried memory. Every breath carried accusation. The hall drank it in, but something went wrong. Its hunger faltered. The pulse stuttered. "You're pushing too hard," the Baron snapped. Lucia met his gaze. "No, I'm teaching it." The final note rang out, low, deliberate, unbroken. Silence crashed down. The hall did not pulse. It waited. For the first time, the Baron looked uneasy. He placed his hand against the stone. It did not answer him. Lucia felt it instead, slow, aligned, listening. "You don't own it," she said quietly. "You never did." The Baron stepped back. Just one step, but it was enough. Above them, the manor creaked, as if adjusting to a new truth. Lucia lowered her hand. Her voice trembled, but not from weakness. From control. The hall had made its choice. And it was not him. The Baron did not speak at once. Silence stretched between them, thick and dangerous. The hall waited, its pulse slow but deliberate, like a creature choosing whether to strike or protect. Lucia stood still. She did not lower her eyes. She did not apologize. At last the Baron smiled. It was not the thin smile from before. This one was careful, measured. "So," he said softly, "it listens to you now." Lucia felt the walls shift at his words. Not in fear, in warning. "For now," she replied. He circled her slowly, hands clasped behind his back. "Do you know how many singers failed before you?" he asked. "How many voices were swallowed because they thought talent was power?" "I know what power is now," Lucia said. The chandeliers flickered. Just once. The Baron stopped. "Power," he said quietly, "always demands payment." That night, the punishment came without announcement. No chains, no guards. They took the violinist. Lucia heard the scream echo through the lower corridors. Short, sharp, cut off too quickly. The walls recoiled. The hall pulsed violently, uneven, distressed. She ran. By the time she reached the practice chamber, it was empty. Only the violin lay on the floor, its strings snapped. Wood split clean down the center. Her chest tightened. "This is my fault," she whispered. The hall answered not with hunger but with pressure, heavy, insistent, understanding. Later the Baron's voice drifted through the corridors, calm, polite. "Tomorrow," he announced, "we perform for a full audience." Lucia froze. "They will hear you," he continued, "at your strongest, or they will watch you break." That night, Lucia returned to the hall alone. She placed both palms against the stone. The pulse met her immediately, fast and anxious. "They will hurt others," she said softly. The walls tightened. "If I fail?" The hall pulsed harder. Lucia closed her eyes. "Then listen carefully," she whispered. "Tomorrow I won't sing for them." The pulse slowed. Focused. "I'll sing for you." Deep within the stone, something shifted. Not hunger, not obedience. Alignment. Above, the Baron prepared invitations, unaware that the hall had already accepted a different command. Lucia opened her eyes. Fear was still there, but beneath it, something sharper. Resolve. Tomorrow the hall would not just listen, it would answer. The hall was full. Every seat occupied. Velvet, silk, polished shoes. Power gathered shoulder to shoulder, whispering behind gloved hands. They had come for beauty, for control, for possession disguised as art. Lucia stood behind the curtain. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from restraint. The hall pulsed beneath her feet, steady, alert, waiting for her signal. It knew what was coming. The Baron raised his hand. Applause faded. "Sing," he said. Lucia stepped onto the stage. The lights burned hot. Faces blurred into a single watching mass. She did not bow. She did not smile. Her first note did not please. It unsettled. The sound moved low and slow, filling the chamber like fog. The hall pulled at it instinctively, then stopped. It held the sound instead of feeding. Murmurs spread through the audience. Lucia sang of loss, not as tragedy, as accusation. The walls began to vibrate. Chandeliers rattled. A woman in the front row gasped, clutching her chest. A man laughed nervously, then fell silent. The Baron's smile vanished. "Stop!" he hissed. Lucia sang louder. The hall answered. Sound thickened, layered, multiplied. The walls reflected memory. Not music, every grief ever swallowed, every confession buried in stone. The audience stiffened, trapped in their seats by a weight they could not see. Some cried, some begged, some remembered things they had paid to forget. Cracks spidered across the marble floor. The Baron stepped back. "You will destroy it," he shouted. Lucia met his eyes. "No," she said. "I'm freeing it." Her final note rang out, pure, unwavering, merciless. The chandeliers shattered. Darkness fell. When the lights returned, people were on their knees, some unconscious, some sobbing openly. The hall's pulse slowed, no longer hungry, no longer enslaved. The Baron stood alone. The walls did not answer him. Lucia lowered her voice. Her throat burned. Blood touched her lips. But she stood. For the first time, the audience did not applaud. They fled. Above them, Reason Manor groaned, as if shedding something ancient and rotten. Lucia placed her hand on the stage. The hall pulsed once, gentle, grateful. The performance was over, but the reckoning had only begun. The hall was empty again, not peacefully, exhausted. Broken chandeliers lay scattered like fallen stars. Marble dust coated the floor. The air still vibrated faintly, as if the sound had not fully decided to leave. Lucia stood alone on the stage. Her throat burned with every breath. Blood had dried at the corner of her mouth. The hall pulsed once beneath her feet, soft, restrained. No hunger, only recognition. Footsteps echoed. The Baron entered slowly. No guards, no anger, just calculation. "You've ruined everything," he said calmly. Lucia did not turn. "No, I ended it." He laughed quietly. "Ended? You think power disappears when it's exposed?" He gestured to the ruined hall. "This place fed empires, judges, kings. They will rebuild it." The walls tightened. "They won't," Lucia said. "It won't let them." The Baron's smile faded. For the first time, uncertainty crept into his eyes. He placed his palm against the stone. The hall did not respond. "It answered me once," he said. "Yes," Lucia replied. "Because you starved it. I listened to it." Silence stretched. Then the hall pulsed, deep, resonant, not sound, intention. The Baron staggered. Just one step, but it was enough. "You don't belong here anymore," Lucia whispered. The walls closed in, not physically but perceptibly. The air thickened around him, heavy with every voice ever taken. The Baron gasped, clutching his chest, overwhelmed not by force but by memory. "No," he choked. Lucia watched. She did not sing. She did not need to. The hall had learned. Moments later, the pressure released. The Baron collapsed to his knees, breath ragged, eyes empty. He was alive, but hollowed, stripped of command. Above them, the manor creaked, settling into something quieter. Lucia stepped off the stage. Her legs trembled. The hall pulsed once more, gentle, almost apologetic. "I won't use you again," she said softly. The pulse slowed. At dawn, the servants found the Baron wandering the garden, silent, unrecognizing. Invitations burned unread in his study. The doors to the hall remained sealed. Lucia left before sunrise. No escort, no farewell. As she passed the gates, she felt it one last time, a faint echo beneath the earth. Not a call, a promise kept. The hall was full, every seat occupied. Velvet, silk, polished shoes. Power gathered shoulder to shoulder, whispering behind gloved hands. They had come for beauty, for control, for possession disguised as art. Lucia stood behind the curtain. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from restraint. The hall pulsed beneath her feet, steady, alert, waiting for her signal. It knew what was coming. The Baron raised his hand. Applause faded. "Sing," he said. Lucia stepped onto the stage. The lights burned hot. Faces blurred into a single watching mass. She did not bow. She did not smile. Her first note did not please. It unsettled. The sound moved low and slow, filling the chamber like fog. The hall pulled at it instinctively, then stopped. It held the sound instead of feeding. Murmurs spread through the audience. Lucia sang of loss, not as tragedy, as accusation. The walls began to vibrate. Chandeliers rattled. A woman in the front row gasped, clutching her chest. A man laughed nervously, then fell silent. The Baron's smile vanished. "Stop!" he hissed. Lucia sang louder. The hall answered. Sound thickened, layered, multiplied. The walls reflected memory. Not music, every grief ever swallowed, every confession buried in stone. The audience stiffened, trapped in their seats by a weight they could not see. Some cried, some begged, some remembered things they had paid to forget. Cracks spidered across the marble floor. The Baron stepped back. "You will destroy it," he shouted. Lucia met his eyes. "No," she said. "I'm freeing it." Her final note rang out, pure, unwavering, merciless. The chandelier shattered. Darkness fell. When the lights returned, people were on their knees, some unconscious, some sobbing openly. The hall's pulse slowed, no longer hungry, no longer enslaved. The Baron stood alone. The walls did not answer him. Lucia lowered her voice. Her throat burned. Blood touched her lips. But she stood. For the first time, the audience did not applaud. They fled. Above them, Reason Manor groaned, as if shedding something ancient and rotten. Lucia placed her hand on the stage. The hall pulsed once, gentle, grateful. The performance was over, but the reckoning had only begun. The hall was empty again, not peacefully, exhausted. Broken chandeliers lay scattered like fallen stars. Marble dust coated the floor. The air still vibrated faintly, as if the sound had not fully decided to leave. Lucia stood alone on the stage. Her throat burned with every breath. Blood had dried at the corner of her mouth. The hall pulsed once beneath her feet, soft, restrained. No hunger, only recognition. Footsteps echoed. The Baron entered slowly. No guards, no anger, just calculation. You've ruined everything, he said calmly. Lucia did not turn. No, I ended it. He laughed quietly. Ended? You think power disappears when it's exposed? He gestured to the ruined hall. This place fed empires, judges, kings. They will rebuild it. The walls tightened. They won't, Lucia said. It won't let them. The Baron's smile faded. For the first time, uncertainty crept into his eyes. He placed his palm against the stone. The hall did not respond. It answered me once, he said. Yes, Lucia replied. Because you starved it. I listened to it. Silence stretched. Then the hall pulsed, deep, resonant, not sound, intention. The Baron staggered. Just one step, but it was enough. You don't belong here anymore, Lucia whispered. The walls closed in, not physically but perceptibly. The air thickened around him, heavy with every voice ever taken. The Baron gasped, clutching his chest, overwhelmed not by force but by memory. No, he choked. Lucia watched. She did not sing. She did not need to. The hall had learned. Moments later, the pressure released. The Baron collapsed to his knees, breath ragged, eyes empty. He was alive, but hollowed, stripped of command. Above them, the manor creaked, settling into something quieter. Lucia stepped off the stage. Her legs trembled. The hall pulsed once more, gentle, almost apologetic. I won't use you again, she said softly. The pulse slowed. At dawn, the servants found the Baron wandering the garden, silent, unrecognizing. Invitations burned unread in his study. The doors to the hall remained sealed. Lucia left before sunrise. No escort, no farewell. As she passed the gates, she felt it one last time, a faint echo beneath the earth. Not a call, a promise kept. The world moved on. It always did. Roads were built near the ruins. Signs erected. History simplified into plaques that spoke of architecture and tragedy. Never hunger, never voices. Lucia avoided the place. Not out of fear, out of respect. But one autumn evening, the pull returned, not sharp, not urgent. An invitation, not a command. She felt it in her bones, subtle as memory. She packed nothing. By dawn, she stood at the hill again. Reason Manor was barely a skeleton now. Ivy threaded through broken stone. The sealed doors lay exposed, no longer guarded. They were open. Inside, the hall waited. Not pulsing, not silent, balanced. Lucia stepped forward. Her footsteps echoed once, then settled. The air felt different, lighter, as if the space no longer leaned inward. It did not pull at her chest. It did not test her throat. You kept your word, she whispered. The hall answered with stillness. She walked to the center of the stage, the place where it had all broken, where power had slipped, where sound had learned restraint. Lucia closed her eyes. She did not sing. She listened. For the first time, she heard what had always been buried beneath the hunger, layers of voices, not trapped but remembered. None were calling out. None were asking to be freed. They had been released the night she chose silence over domination. Lucia understood then. The hall had never needed her voice. It had needed an ending, a decision. She placed her hand on the stone one last time. No pulse answered. No pressure followed. Only warmth. When she turned to leave, the sound followed her, not from the hall, but from herself. A breath, steady, complete. Outside, the wind moved through broken arches, producing a soft, accidental harmony, natural, unowned. Lucia smiled. She walked down the hill without looking back. Behind her, the hall did not close. It did not awaken. It remained, a place that could have devoured the world and chose not to. Somewhere between ruin and memory it found peace, and so did she. Years passed, quietly. The hill became just another rise of land. The manor's name faded from maps. Children played near the ruins without knowing why their voices softened there, why shouting felt wrong. Lucia lived long enough to be forgotten. That was how she wanted it. When she died, there was no audience, no music, no last confession carved into sound. Only a small room, a window open to the sea and air that moved freely. Her final breath left without resistance. Far away beneath stone and soil, nothing stirred. No pulse answered. No hunger woke. Silence remained intact. Long after scholars debated the legend. Some claimed the hall never existed. Others insisted it still waited, buried, patient, dangerous. Expeditions were proposed, then abandoned. Something about the place discouraged ambition. The earth remembered, not as desire, as restraint. One night, decades later, a singer stood on a distant stage, young, untouched by power. Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from honesty. The audience listened. They did not worship. They did not consume. They simply heard. That was enough. Deep underground, stone rested, not asleep, at peace. The world did not need another hall that fed on suffering. It needed rooms that let sound pass through without keeping it. History would never record Lucia's name, but every time music was allowed to end, every time silence was chosen instead of control, something of her remained, not as echo, as absence. And absence, when earned, is not emptiness. It is freedom. The story ended where it should have always ended. Without applause, without chains, with silence, unclaimed.